Hey everybody, it is Thursday afternoon and we are going to talk about the 7 test taking tips you need to know. Things that you're going to want to share with your children to help them out, make this whole testing process a little bit easier. So the first thing that I want to mention is that ACT, SAT tests are not like high school tests. You know, kids want to approach them the same way. But in school, they're taught something for 7 to 10 days. They get a study guide. They're familiar with the exact information that will be on the test, and then they're tested on it. ACT, SAT is not like that. Too many students enter the test thinking it's going to test them on their previous knowledge, on something that they've recently learned in high school, and it is not doing that at all. The ACT and SAT, while there is some curriculum, math, the rest of the sections are not. It's their ability to problem solve quickly. It is their ability to decipher information quickly. And so there are tips and tricks to help them get where they need to be with that and to do well on all of it. Math, there is math that they need to know, and I can't stress enough the importance of them memorizing some of the more common formulas. So Pythagorean theorem can be used dozens of times on the test. They'll also need to know area, circumference, formulas for circles, area, perimeter for squares, rectangles, and so forth, as well as much as possible about triangles. Triangles are all over the test, and they need to remember all of the formulas for triangles. Super, super, super important. When we're thinking about triangles, they make up a large portion of the questions that seem the most difficult. And so students need to be able to recognize how they can utilize information they know about a triangle to figure out other things. Again, it's a lot about problem solving, and going into it knowing that it's more about problem solving than actually past information is going to help them navigate it a lot better. Let's talk about English, for instance. The English section of the test, sure, there's grammar in there, but the test really goes beyond just your understanding of basic grammar. They're really trying to trick students, and I'll give you an example. So a colon, 2 dots, the colon is used to start a list. And so the test will give you a 1-item list. Most people, when they think of lists, they're thinking multiple items. So when a student sees a sentence that has perhaps a colon and then 1 item, they're thinking it doesn't work because they've been taught list. 1 item doesn't seem like a list. Or if they see a sentence, a comma, and then 1 item, they're not looking to put a colon in there because, again, they're not recognizing it as a list. So when we work on ACT test prep and SAT test prep with students, we make sure that they know how the test will try to deceive them. It's great when a student can tell me, oh yeah, colon starts a list. But if they don't know the test will purposely give them a 1-item list that doesn't appear to be a list, they're not going to make the right decision in that case. So knowing what those tricks are will help quite a bit. So understanding what that colon is used for and that it can be 1 item is very important. Also in the English section, knowing that the test hates commas. Both tests hate commas, or hate commas. The typical high school student loves commas. The typical high school student, when they're writing, if they pause to think, they put a comma in there as though it's a placeholder, as though the pause should signify us taking a breath. That is not what a comma is used for. There are only 2 times you're using commas on these tests. One is a true list. True list is where we have the red, comma blue, comma green, comma yellow, and yellow marbles are in the bowl. Something like that is a true list. Students often want to separate every adjective with commas, and that is not the case. So if I said something like, her long blonde silky hair blew in the wind, We would not use commas between long, blonde, and silky because that's not a list. Long is describing the blonde hair, blonde is describing the silky hair, versus the red was never describing the blue marble. So that's the difference. But students don't often recognize that. They think there should be commas. So there's only 2 times, true list and then parenthetical statements. And that is excessively used on the test. So students really need to recognize parentheticals. We see that 20 to 25 times on the test. So super important. English is the area where we see students do the best, even if they are hardcore math science kids, because there's only 10 rules. If you know the 10 rules for English, you're going to score really well. Our average student on ACT goes up 11 points in English alone, but we've had even greater gains than that because those 10 rules are so important. So for students to recognize the basics and also know that like I said, they're really trying to be tricked in there. They must recognize that. Another trick they like to play in the English section is with the word it. Students often think of all possessives as having an apostrophe S or S apostrophe. And it defies that rule. The possessive is just ITS. When students are rushing, the test is timed, they're looking to get there quickly, they think possessive and they pick the wrong one. So little tricks like that make a huge difference when students are prepared for them. One of the things we really want to stress to students is quality on the test is so much more important than quantity. We will have students score much lower than they anticipate. 4.0 students coming in and scored a 21, 22, 23. And keep in mind the ACT's out of 36. And they're like, oh my gosh, I do so well in school, I just don't understand. But again, the test is different. It's not testing that prior knowledge. It's really focusing on how much of a problem solver you are. Well, students often are rushing. They're rushing to get through and they miss those tricks. And in doing so, they don't perform well. They'll often say, oh, I didn't score well because I had to rush on the last 10. I just had to circle something in on the last 10. That's not why they haven't done well. It's because they missed things along the way because they were rushing to get to that last 10. I've had students where it's taken a while to get them to substantially change their test taking methods, to slow down, to really ensure everything is correct. And they've watched their score increase by minimizing those silly mistakes, those little errors. The ACT allows you to order what's called the test information release on 3 tests throughout the year. The December test is the next one. That test information release means your child will receive their answer key. It'll show all of the correct answers and how they answered everything. This is eye-opening for students because, again, if they come out of a test and they say, oh, the reason I didn't score well is I didn't get to the end, and all of a sudden we look at that data and we see, well, you missed question number 3, you missed question number 7, you missed question number 11, and so forth. Now it's like, well, if we clean that up, we don't need to get to those last 10. And so when we show them statistically how it works, how the scoring works, they're often very shocked, but it gives them the opportunity to correct that. Obviously, if you're shooting for a 36 and your child's capable of a 36, they've got to clean up a lot and they have to definitely get through all of the questions. But for most students, a 33, a 34, they can do that by cleaning up that front section and getting close to the end. So super important for them to know. A lot of students really complain about the reading section and how difficult that is. I mean, it's painful for some students to have to sit and read because it's not something that they enjoy. And I'll admit it, these passages are typically not very enjoyable. But what they should be doing in their practice is understanding that the 4 sections in reading are very different from each other. The first section is always prose or literary narrative. It's fiction-based. It is very much about feelings without coming out and telling you how they feel. But their word choices will let you know what those feelings are. Students often miss that. They're in skim mode. They're looking for facts. So they're missing the fact that if I'm talking about going home to my hometown and I call it a whole of a town, that I'm not happy about going there. They miss those little nuances, those inferences. And so if they understand what they should be looking for, it makes it a lot easier for them to do well. The second section is social science, and it's the history of something. There will be more facts, but there's definitely inference in there as well. Then you have humanities. It's most like a magazine article. And then finally, natural science, which is very fact-laden. And if students practice, they'll see that there is one section that they consistently do poorly on, or worse than the others. 35 minutes, 4 sections of reading, and 40 questions. If you're running out of time, you have to figure out which of those 4 is your worst and do it last. Because otherwise, you're wasting valuable time. Let's say the first section is your absolute worst. You're just consistently getting only 6 out of 10, 7 out of 10. And the other sections, you're seeing progress. You're getting 9 out of 10 or 10 out of 10. Well, I don't want to spend my valuable time on that first section and then have to rush on the 4th one where I knew I was capable of getting a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. Managing the test is so important to achieving a good score. So understanding what your strengths are and making sure you knock those sections out of the park. And then if you're going to rush, you rush on a section you're not naturally as gifted with, not naturally as proficient in, will help a lot. One of the other things that comes as a huge surprise to students is the fact that the science section on the ACT is nothing they learned in high school. It has the most basic science information that they're testing, but it's all hidden in paragraphs, in charts, in diagrams, in graphs. I cannot tell you how many students really do not understand how to read a graph. And I challenge most students when they tell me they're good at it, okay, great, tell me what does this graph mean? And literally they cite the black and white stuff I can read. Oh, it's over 60 days. It's 2 sites and they're testing this. Okay, great, what does that mean? It's 2 sites over 60 days testing this? No, you have to be able to draw conclusions. You have to understand what that information means. And when we work with students on ACT, I can tell you the knowledge they gain from being able to understand graphs, tables, and charts is going to help them substantially in college. They are really going to go in so much better prepared because they're learning how to analyze information, not just tell me what the black and white says, but actually analyze it and understand it and draw conclusions. The conclusions are the most important part. But often students will say, oh, I didn't do well in chemistry, so I didn't do well on the science. Or, oh, I haven't had physics yet, so I didn't do well on the science. You don't have to have had physics or chemistry. And I'll cite as a fact, there are several school districts that will have their 8th graders take the test. They will pay for their 8th graders, top 60 students or something in 8th grade who clearly have not had high school sciences yet. And statistically, they score better than the national average for high school seniors, including in the science section, because it's really learning the tools to understand and analyze and draw conclusions, not their prior knowledge. So if students realize that, they'll know to approach it in a different way. Instead of suddenly they're reading different chemicals going, oh my gosh, I don't remember this. I don't know what chemicals these are. They don't need to. And knowing that will reduce the anxiety and the stress when they open up to something that they know is not familiar, but they know they learned the techniques to figure it out. So super, super important. We can't stress enough how important it is to take notes. Most students have never learned how to take notes out of a question. And most students come back complaining, when they take a test initially, they're like, oh my gosh, the questions were so confusing. Yeah, they're designed to be. So we teach students how to take notes out of a question so they don't get caught up in all the extra words, the misdirection in the questions. So we teach them how to break it down. In math's only made up of two things. Most students can't tell me what those two things are. In fact, go home and ask your kids. If they've never done ECT with us, ask them, what are the two things math is made up of? It's only two. See if they come up with this answer. Numbers and shapes, because that's all math is. It's numbers and shapes. They need to know how to pull numbers and shapes out of math questions, otherwise forget it. They're really going to struggle. In the science, we teach them how to take notes out of the questions so that they don't get caught up in all the super sciencey language, so that they can really break it down and understand the questions. They need to be able to do that throughout the test. So notes are incredibly important. Students will push back, like, oh, I don't have time to take notes. You don't have time not to. It's going to be so much clearer what is being asked, what you need to do if you take notes out instead of rereading questions. If you ask your child and they tell you that they had to reread questions, they don't have the skills necessary to get where they need to be, and they need to learn those skills. And taking notes is a big, huge portion of it. And then parents, the one thing that you can really, really help your kids with is what some of my success coaches here call pregame. So if you have a child who has participated in any sport or in theater, in band, it's really normal for them to have to show up at least an hour before their event, right? If they're in a sport, they're going to show up, they're going to warm up, they're going to do, some specific skills, practice before they get into their event. And yet kids think it's perfectly acceptable to wake up, grab a snack, not even a real breakfast, and head off to the test. Did you warm up your brain? Did you think about that? We've read recent studies where if you are as much as, or as little as, I should say, 2% dehydrated, it can affect your cognitive ability by 40%. That's huge. Why take the chance? You may go, oh no, that's impossible. I don't know. We read more than one study about it. We're always looking for ways to help our students. And so I'm a big proponent of, we're not going to take that chance. You're going to get up. We have a rule that you have to be feet on the floor an hour before you have to leave your house. Not an hour before the test, an hour before you have to leave the house. If you have to leave your house at 7:10 in the morning to get to your testing site, that means you need to be feet on the floor, upright, out of bed, not laying there scrolling TikTok and Snapchat and everything else, but out of bed at 6:10. Oh my gosh, what will you do for that hour? Well, you're going to eat a good breakfast. You're going to drink a lot of water. And then they always say, yeah, but then I'm going to have to use the restroom. Yeah, and you've got plenty of time. You've got that hour. And then while they're eating breakfast, be practicing. Be going through the notes. I had a student a few years ago. He's now a junior in college. So crazy to think he's already a junior in college and just loving life, doing super well. But he came in, really smart kid, great grades in high school. But his English score on the ACT kept pulling him down. And English is the first section when you walk in to take the test. And he would come into the office and we went through the rules. He understood the rules. He could repeat the rules. And he would take the first passage, 15 questions. He'd get 6 wrong. I'm like, what are you doing? You know this. The next passage, he'd get 5 or 6 wrong. The last 3, 0 wrong. And this was like consistent. Practice session after practice session. And I told him, I said, on test day, I need you to get up and I need you to do 2 or 3 passages of English. Do not leave your house without doing 2 or 3 passages of English. Like, I don't know what it is, but you have got a mental block when you start with it every single time. And we need to take care of that mental block at home while you're eating breakfast, then go take the test. And he did, and he scored a 35. He missed 1 question, maybe 2. But the point is that we know that kids should warm up when they go to athletic events or, if they're going to go to the band, they don't just, pull their trumpet out right beforehand. No, they're prepared. They've done some warm-up activities. We need kids to get into the habit of warming up before they're taking a test. They need to get that cognitive ability, moving. Let's get out of the brain fog of sleeping. I tell students they should drive themselves to their testing center because you have to use your decision-making skills when you're driving. Oh, is this guy going to stop? Maybe I should wait. Oh, I think that light's changing. I need to stop right here. I need to change lanes. Do I need to turn here? Where should I park? What door do I go into? There's a lot of decision making there that can help them warm up their brain for all the decision making they'll do on the test. Super important they eat a great dinner the night before. Super important that they eat a real breakfast. So a banana is not a real breakfast. A cup of yogurt, not a real breakfast. A granola bar, not a real breakfast. You want to have some proteins and some carbs so that you're fully fueled for all 4 hours. If your child's complaining like, oh, the test is too long, I can't sit here for 4 hours, it's so hard. They need to look at it from a different perspective. I've got to sit here for 45 minutes for English. It's only 45 minutes. I've just got to sit here for 45 minutes. I can do 45 minutes, not a problem. Okay, now I have 60 minutes for math. I need all 60 minutes. This is good. I have 60 minutes for math. Now I have a break. So make sure that they have a snack, water, whatever for their break, because they do get a break. And then you know what? It's only 35 minutes for reading. Gosh, 35 minutes is going to go by like that. That's not a problem. And then 35 minutes for science and I'm done. It's all about perspective. If they have that perspective, they will not feel as exhausted when they hit that science section as they do if they're going, oh my gosh, it's 4 hours. It's going to be so hard. And I can't remember anything by the time I get to science. So those are, I think we went way over 7 tips, but those are things that you can definitely help your child with. Things that, tips and tricks, a little bit of what we teach in our ACT boot camp, but things that can really be a difference maker for your child. The most important thing though is that they understand there are specific skills in doing well in an ACT or SAT test. Skills they're not taught in high school for their typical high school test. So if they've already taken a standardized test and didn't score well, they should not look at it as a failure on their part. They should look at it as a clue that they need to learn how to take this type of test. And a lot of parents have heard me say, I use the analogy, I've been driving for a long time, and I'm a good driver. But if somebody threw me keys to their stick shift, we are going nowhere. It doesn't matter that it looks the same, that it starts the same, that it has a gas pedal, brake pedal, all of that. Doesn't matter. I can't drive a stick shift. Never been taught. So if your child hasn't been taught how to take a test, it's something that definitely makes a difference, not only in their scores, but in their confidence, and ultimately can make a huge difference in their acceptance to a college as well as scholarship money. So definitely worth the investment. If your child is not a child who can go in and take an unknown test and figure it out on the fly in that time setting, which most kids can't, definitely worth the investment. So talk to you soon. Hope that you got a lot out of these test taking tips. Pass them on to your students. Remember, ask them first, what are the 2 things math is made up of? See if you get the right answer. Talk to you soon.